Hello, I'm Suki Baxter, and this is your super quick walkthrough on the anatomy and function of your arms and shoulders. Let's go ahead and dive into why your arms and shoulders are important to the posture rehab process. Hands and shoulders aren't meant to be supportive structures. So in the human anatomy, our legs and feet and hips are what hold us upright. We are not quadrupeds, meaning we don't walk on all fours, we just walk on two legs. And so your hands and arms are meant to do things like, picking berries, carrying small objects, fine motor skill type things. However, today's modern lifestyle puts undue strain on these structures. So a lot of us, because we are seated at computers and using our hands and arms, we lean on them quite a bit. They've become almost like a quasi quadrupedal structure. So our shoulders are being asked to do a lot of work that is very repetitive in nature and puts a lot of demand on the very delicate muscles that are meant to be mobility muscles around your shoulder and your neck and your spine. And we'll take a closer look at that when we dive into the anatomy. I'll show you how all of that fits together. Arm and shoulder tension directly affects neck and spinal mobility. So again, your arm and shoulder muscles are actually connected to your neck and your spine, and I'll show you an illustration where you can see how that fits together. But if there are restrictions in your arms and back, or excuse me, your arms and shoulders, then those muscles that affect the mobility of your arms and shoulders are going to be tight. And since they also connect to the ribs and the spine, then in turn your spine will also have some challenges. And restrictions in the shoulders can impinge breathing. So your shoulders actually rest on your rib cage in a sort of hammock of muscles. And if those muscles are tight, then the ribs aren't going to be able to move very easily, and therefore they can't expand to create more lung space. So getting movement through the arm and shoulder and getting those muscles softened and more resilient can help with your spinal mobility, it can help with your neck mobility, and it can increase breathing capacity. Let's go ahead and take a look at the anatomy of your arms and shoulders. So as always, it's not important to memorize any of these structures. I just want to give you a visual of what things look like inside your body. So what you can see here is your shoulder joint. It has been completely separated from the body. So this is your shoulder joint isolated, not in situ. And what you see on the back there is that wing-shaped bone. That's your scapula, or you may hear it called your shoulder blade. And then the sort of long bone at the top is the clavicle, which is also called your collarbone. And then the humerus is the long bone on the right-hand side, and that is your arm bone, your upper arm bone. So this is what your shoulder structure looks like in and of itself. This structure does sit on your rib cage, and I will show you a picture of that in a moment so you can get a better idea of how that fits together. But it's a very lightweight, very delicate structure. And in fact, the only bony connection that your shoulder has to the rest of your body, so to your trunk, is where the clavicle connects in to your sternum. So that scapula doesn't connect to any other bones on your body. The humerus, the arm bone, does not connect to any other bones on the body. So the only joint that it has with your trunk is where that clavicle connects in. So taking a look at the front of the shoulder joint, I want to talk about the nerves, but before I dive into that, you can see towards the left-hand side of this illustration, the long straight bone is your collarbone, your clavicle, and you can see where it kind of connects to the center bone at your sternum, or that's actually the top of your sternum, called your manubrium. Again, not important that you memorize those, but that is that joint that I was talking about where your clavicle connects into the rest of your body. The nerve supply to your arm exits the spine in your neck, traveling underneath your collarbone and through the thick muscles of your chest. So there are no muscles on this illustration, but you can imagine, looking at these yellow lines, that they're running through all of the tissue that's on the front of your chest. And if you've ever heard of thoracic outlet syndrome, thoracic outlet is that space above the clavicle there. And a lot of times when there is undue tension and strain in the shoulder girdle, which is what we call your whole yoke of your shoulders and your upper ribs, what happens is that space becomes occluded, and then the nerves can't send clear signals down the arm. And so a lot of times people will feel tingling, numbness, hot and cold sensations, and even radiating pain into their arms. So getting that space opened up and those muscles soft and moving again is imperative to keep healthy nerve supply to the arm. So here we have an illustration that shows you how the muscles of your shoulder are connected to your spine and neck. Now these are just a select few muscles, but this is a really good illustration to show you that shoulder muscles really are neck muscles and they really are back muscles. And so in our Western medical model, we talk about the shoulder and we talk about the neck and we talk about the spine, and it's as though all of these structures were separate structures, but really, where do you delineate between shoulder and back? If you look at this illustration, so that big broad muscle at the bottom there on the left-hand side that's labeled latissimus dorsi, it's a very powerful shoulder muscle, but it's also a back muscle. So at what point would you say it stops being a back muscle and starts being a shoulder muscle? So any kind of restriction or impingement in your shoulder is going to directly affect your spine. It's going to directly affect your neck and even up into your cranium. Shoulder tension can result in tension headaches. I just don't believe you can separate neck tension from shoulder tension, particularly if you look at that muscle there called the levator scapula. You can see it connects to the upper part of the shoulder and runs right up into the neck and affects the cranium. So getting the shoulder moving is going to help your whole trunk, neck, and skull to feel more mobile and loose. And because the shoulder kind of hangs on the rib cage, you can see on the right-hand side how that scapula glides over the rib cage. Again, there's no bony joints there. It just sort of hangs in this hammock of soft tissue. If that hammock of soft tissue is really restricted, those ribs aren't going to be able to move well, which one, affects your spinal mobility, and two, it's going to impinge your breathing. So I feel like getting your shoulders moving is one of the biggest things we can do for the health of your back and neck. And then let's just take a quick look at the anatomy of your arm and your forearm. And the only thing I really want you to take away from this is the similarity here. So on the left-hand side, I have put an illustration of your foot and lower leg. And on the right-hand side, that is your upper arm. So you can see, obviously, the bones of your arm are much more lightweight, much more delicate, but there is a very, very similar structure. Of course, feet are always shown, generally always shown with, standing position. So if you were to flex your hand up and have it in kind of like as though it were sitting on a table, it would look more similar. But even those small bones at the wrist joint, which you can see the long bones of the fingers, and then there's kind of a grouping of small bones just behind that. And those bones are actually really similar to the bones that you have in your foot. The bones that you have in your foot are much more heavyweight again. But they're delicate structures, very similar, and kind of meant for similar function and similar dexterity. Okay, so let's take a moment to talk about emotions and the shoulders. Shoulders are one of the most expressive areas of the body. So when you look at someone and you get a vibe that they're having a down day or they're really excited about something, it often shows in the set of their shoulders. Stress is immediately evident in the tension around the shoulders, and this is something you'll both feel and notice when you're looking at, looking at somebody. I talk to a lot of my clients who say, I carry my stress in my shoulders, and that's really, really common. That's part of the stress response is mobilizing for action. So your body is mobilizing those arms and getting ready to fend off any kind of danger when you're stressed. It doesn't know the difference between a report that's due and a tiger that's stalking you in the woods. It just knows danger. It doesn't have any nuance there. And then arms and hands are how we interact with the world physically. So in terms of tension in your forearm and your hands, there are a lot of biomechanical influences. For example, keyboarding and mousing can really build up tension in the forearm and the wrist, and also in that area around the brachial plexus. But It's also a way that people tend to kind of hold back or shut down because it's a way that we reach out and interact with other people. When you're talking about shaking hands or touching a person, that can be really overstimulating for somebody whose nervous system is already in a highly activated state. So sometimes you'll find some people who have a very highly activated nervous system, whether that is learned, inherited, a result of a traumatic experience, whether that's accident, injury, or like some kind of emotional trauma, will sometimes have stored tension in the forearm and hand as a way to sort of insulate and armor, like between them and the world. And then, very interestingly, hunched shoulders can create feelings of low self esteem or sadness, but sitting up straight helps you to recall more positive memories and feel more energetic. So, there are a bunch of studies done on posture and its influence on mood and memory, even the ability to solve problems. So, hunched over shoulders can actually cause stress as much as being stressed can cause hunched over shoulders. So, again, that's that two-way street of the body where the body communicates to the brain and the brain communicates down to the body. So, getting shoulders to be upright, relaxed, and back and in position where we want them not only looks and feels better just from a physical and flexibility standpoint, but it will also send a signal to your brain that you're in a safe and relaxed state. All right, this has been your super quick walkthrough of the anatomy and function of your arms and shoulders. As always, you can come back to this video if during the practices you have any confusion or just want a clearer picture of what you're working with. You can go ahead and continue on to the modules or the videos in this module.